Okay, it is 12 o'clock on Tuesday, August 19th, and we are getting ready to start the boot camp for today through Find Your Fit. My name is Mary Pat O'Neill, and I created the Find Your Fit program. I'm a local college counselor, and I'm simply here to help all of you today. Parents, welcome. Students, welcome. This program is designed for rising seniors, so this would be the class of 26. Um, and I'm just realizing my slide has not been updated, but the information has been. Anyways, welcome and know that at the end of today's session, I'll turn off the recording and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have. So as we start today's session, which is on creating a college list for applying to college, keep in mind that there are so many colleges in the United States. There are more than 2,000 four-year public and private universities in the United States. And my life would be a lot easier. Your life would be a lot easier if everybody did things the same way, but they don't. So that'll play into what you hear over the next couple sessions that we have. And also keep in mind, and this is such a wonderful thing, is that every one of us is different. Just because your friends might be applying to a specific school or your parents want you to apply to a certain school or whatever, we're all different. And so our college lists are going to be different and it should be celebrated. Okay, so here's the format for this week. Today is the how to create a balanced college list. And also, I hope you understand by the time we're done why that is an important thing to have as a balanced college list. Plus, as I said, I'll follow up with questions and answers afterwards. Those will not be recorded. Tomorrow, we're going to do the session on how to complete your college applications. I'm mostly focusing on the common application. And again, I will answer any questions afterwards. And then on Thursday, the 21st, is how to write the college essay. And this is a longer session. It is 2 hours. These are all being recorded. The resources have been sent out. You should have received an email with a link to the resources. The recordings will not be sent out in, it can be anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks that the foundation sends them out, but they will be sent to everybody who registered for the boot camp. So, okay. I have been working as a college counselor for a long time, and I like to joke a lot. And one of my jokes is that nobody has ever said, Mary Pat, would you please create a bad college list for me? Nobody wants to go to a bad college. I don't want to send anybody to a bad college or put it on their list. But I think that the definition of what a good college is can be confusing because oftentimes what people equate good to is the lowest acceptance rate possible. And that is not a true statement. It doesn't mean that those aren't good schools, but there are plenty of good schools out there. And for many of you, because it is August, right before the start of senior year, you might already have a college list and you might think it's pretty much set. All I ask is that today you keep an open mind and to listen to what I have to say and why I'm saying it, because it's never about the student. It usually has to do with the school. And that maybe when this is done today, you might say, oh, I might add 1 or 2 additional schools based on what I learned today. So that's all I'm asking. Anyways, so what makes up a good college? And I'm going to be going through each one of these, but first is the graduation rate. The second is the retention rate, which I'll explain. Third point is what programs are offered by that college. The third one is, or sorry, the fourth one is cost. Does it work within a family's budget? And then the fifth piece is culture. Again, does it fit the college? Because I am all about fit. So first of all, the four-year graduation rate. We're going to be talking a little bit later about the cost of college, but let me be upfront. College is very, very expensive. And as a parent myself, I have 2 adult children. It was really important to my husband and I that our kids graduated in 4 years, or possibly less. Neither did, but that's okay. Um, in 4 years because of the high cost. And so when you're looking at data, and I'm a big data person, I'll be showing you lots of different resources. I like to see, at a minimum, a four-year graduation rate of 50%. And you might think, that sounds kind of low. But in the United States, about 56% of college freshmen graduate within 6 years. And so I like to see 50% or higher in 4 years. Um, and again, one of my mom's sayings is, I'm a big believer in birds of a feather flock together. And so when we were looking at colleges for our kids, I felt that if most students graduated within 4 years, it was likely that my children would. And then now I do want to point out that sometimes you will see colleges that do not have really high four-year graduation rates. And you should always feel comfortable in asking questions. Never hesitate to ask the admissions office questions. And if you said, "Oh, I see that your four-year graduation rates seem to be low. Can you explain to me why?" An excellent response to that is, our university requires that students do a co-op program. And a co-op program is somewhat similar to an internship, slightly different, but they're required as part of the graduation requirements for a program. And so typically in a co-op program, students must work usually 2 semesters in their field. And it's not an unpaid job, it's a paid job. And typically, you don't pay any tuition during that time, but it's very, very next to impossible to graduate within 4 years. So some of the schools that you might have heard of that are known for having co-op programs would be Northeastern University, Georgia Tech, Purdue, University of Cincinnati, Oregon State University. That's just a few off the top of my head. So just know that those are good things. Another reason they might say, oh, we're overcrowded. And it can sometimes be difficult for students to get the classes that they need to graduate. And it doesn't mean that it's going to take 6 years to graduate, but it might take 4 years plus a couple quarters. Again, the answers can be anything, but ask the questions. And if you're comfortable with it, again, just keep moving on. But the four-year graduation rate is very important. The second piece that I like to look at is the retention rate. And you might not have ever heard of the word retention, but this means it's the percentage of freshmen who come back for their sophomore year. In the United States, the average is in the low 70%. And I like to see it closer to 90% or above. And the reason why is that schools that have strong retention rates, these are schools that are typically doing a really good job of engaging their freshmen, making them feel part of the community, and they want to come back. So retention rate is an important thing. And again, if it's low, you can ask the question, what's going on? So then the third piece is what programs are offered. Okay, so a lot of schools now are asking freshmen on their college application, what's their first choice major, second choice major. So you have to find out, what majors are offered. If you're somebody who's interested in something like, I don't know, biology, that's probably offered everywhere. It doesn't mean the program is the same everywhere, but it's a widely offered one. If you're interested in, I don't know, forensic science, that is not as broadly offered of a major. So you need to find out, what majors are offered, how are freshmen admitted? And again, sometimes you can find out on a website, sometimes you're going to have to ask the question to admissions. Can you change majors? It's not uncommon for freshmen to change their minds and decide to go into a different major. At some schools, that's a very easy process. At others, it might not be. So again, these are questions to ask. What about if you are undecided? Again, I personally don't like to put all this pressure on a 17 or 18-year-old to have their whole life figured out and to know exactly what they want to major in. So, one, does the school allow students to be undecided? And if so, how will you be supported? Because again, going back to the graduation rates, again, I would still want you to be able to graduate in 4 years, even though you don't know what you want to do at the beginning. And so again, how will that school support you? Is there experiential learning? That means, are you gaining practical experience? It could be in the classroom, it could be through co-ops, it could be through internships. What companies are recruiting at that campus? If you're thinking about something that will require you to go to graduate school, what type of results are the students from that program or from that college? Where are they going? How successful are they? How are they supported? If you're interested in law school or medical school or dental school, whatever, how do they support you? Is there a strong alumni network? And again, do you need special support at school? How will you be supported? So these are things that you have to dig a little deeper in. You won't necessarily find them out on a website, but these are things that you shouldn't ignore. Then the fourth piece is the cost. Does the college fit into your family budget? And this is always an area that a lot of times, especially for students who are, just starting senior year, parents don't like to talk about it. But I think it's something that should be known and discussed openly at this point, because if you wait until April of senior year, and that's the first time a student has heard the term, oh, well, we do have a budget, because quite frankly, most of the time there is a budget. It's better to know upfront. And in the United States, parents are expected to pay for college. Now, this does not mean any students out there that you can say, hey, mom and dad, I heard this lady say that you have to pay for my college. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the government doesn't subsidize the cost of college like in Canada. They do that. If you're a Canadian citizen, it's a lot less expensive to go to school at a Canadian university than it is here in the United States. Um, and there is something called the Western Undergraduate Exchange, WUI schools. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but have an idea of what the family budget is. And there's lots of things to consider. You might have younger kids, you might have parents, grandparents that you're supporting. Um, People might be out of work. And then the final piece, which is the culture. And I have to say, a lot of times this is the one people forget about. But as I said earlier, we are all different. We all like different things, we respond to different things, and there's different fits. And so, think about the social scene, think about the academic scene. Some students really like collaboration, some like a Hunger Games situation. Some like to be anonymous, some want to get to know their professors. That's the faculty interaction demographics. Some people want to make sure that when they look around, they see people like them. Other people say, oh, I'd like to be the only one like me, whatever it is. And then also pay attention to the campus environment. I happen to be somebody, I don't like cities, big cities at all. They make me feel edgy, but other people, they love them. Some people want to have nature nearby. Some care more about the shopping. Uh, and pay attention to how far away and how difficult it might be to get to and from a campus. The travel costs can get quite a bit much, or it could take you 2+ hours to get from your campus to the main airport. And how are you going to do that? And so you got to pay attention to all of those different things. And also, as we start talking about creating a college list, make sure that you know your data points. And when I say data points, I'm talking about things like what's your cumulative high school GPA through the end of junior year? You should know that number. How many rigor classes? Rigor classes are things like AP or IB or honors classes. Do you have standardized test scores? This is an area every year is murkier and murkier. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And while nobody is defined by a number, the data is important in this conversation. So make sure you know those points about yourself. In the United States, there are three categories of colleges, and the type of college dramatically impacts the admissibility of a student and also the cost quite dramatically. So I want to make sure that you understand these three different categories. So the first one is the in-state public. We are here in Washington State, and we have 6 four-year public universities. They are the University of Washington, Washington State, Western Washington, Eastern Washington, Central Washington, and Evergreen State College. Because you are a resident of Washington State, you get priority registration at our 6 schools. And I will be using the University of Washington as my example because that's the one most people ask me about. But just know that the other 5 schools are great too. Okay, so at the University of Washington last year, something like 73% of admitted students were Washington State residents. The second thing about the in-state public schools is because we pay property taxes in Washington State, property taxes fund education. So because of all the taxes that we've paid, the tuition at our 6 public universities are deeply discounted. UW and Washington State are the most expensive out of the 6. I think they're going to be about 13,000 next year, which, it's not a low number, but when I tell you the other numbers, it's quite the deal. And that's why so many families really want their students to stay in state because of the cost savings. The second type of college is the out-of-state public university. And this one is a little trickier for me to talk about. I have to speak very generally because it's 49 other states. And as I said before, everybody does things differently. But first of all, you are not a resident in these 49 other states. So you have lost the priority admission. The second thing, because you are not a resident of that state, you're not paying property taxes that go to fund education. So you've lost that tuition discount. Generally speaking, out-of-state, non-resident tuition is 3 times in-state tuition. And again, it depends on the state. So California is a great example. They have 2 systems in the state of California for their public universities. The one is the University of California system, and the other one is the California State University system. If a student was interested in going to the University of California, San Diego, so UCSD, the tuition, not room and board, just tuition, is about, I don't know, $47,000 a year, and then plus room and board. If a student was interested in applying to San Diego State University, which is part of the state system, the tuition is about 20,000. So there can be a big cost savings there. I always tell students it totally depends on the state and the school. A lot of students are interested in staying in the western part of the United States for a variety of reasons. And so if I look at the states in the West, for the most part, Oregon, Colorado, Arizona, Montana, Idaho, Utah, New Mexico, if a student is interested, they have, solid data points, grades and all that kind of stuff, they will very likely be admitted to the schools and the out-of-state schools. And again, depending on the schools, there might be some that say, oh my gosh, we want you so much, and they will throw scholarship money at you. There are other states, and California is certainly the one in the western part of the United States that is a lot more challenging because there are so many people in the state of California and different things like that. So just know that there are some out-of-state public schools that are easy to get into. Some are more challenging. Some will give scholarship money to out-of-state students. Some say, no, 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 we're going to keep all of our scholarship money for our residents because they have paid property taxes and all that kind of stuff. The final category of schools is the private university, which means they're not funded through property taxes. So the price doesn't change as far as the base cost. And sometimes people will say, oh, they're too expensive. Again, it depends on the private university. Generally speaking, they're not necessarily a lot more expensive than the out-of-state public, but there are some that are very generous with scholarship money and can probably make it a lot closer to the cost of in-state public tuition. So keep an open mind. Again, you don't have to make any decisions here, but don't limit yourself. Now, all universities have something that are called institutional priorities. And this can range from anything to saying, we want more females in STEM, we want more in-state students, we need our basketball team, we need a whole bunch of new players or whatever, but it's just whatever is important to them as they're admitting a freshman class. There are some states, and I've listed them here, North Carolina, California, Texas, Virginia, Wisconsin, and Georgia. These are states that have institutional priorities And typically their priorities based on the state legislation, where the state has said you cannot do this, where they have to prioritize in-state students versus out-of-state. And if you think about it, a lot of colleges might like more out-of-state students because they get more money from them. But states have rules. So I'll use Texas as an example. University of Texas Austin is a very popular school that many students want to put on their lists. And again, that's fine. Put it on your list. But I always tell students, you got to pay attention because that automatically is going to be a school. I don't care how smart the student is. I don't care what kind of data points they have. It is going to be an extreme reach school. And it's because of this. So in the state of Texas, 75% of the spots at UT Austin are spoken for because they have a program. I think it's the top 5 or 6%. At every high school, they're guaranteed a spot. Okay. If you're in the top of your graduating class, they're guaranteed a spot. Okay. So that takes up 75%. That leaves 25%. But then by state legislation, they cannot take more than 10% of their students from outside of the state of Texas, when that includes international students. So it just becomes a lot more difficult. It doesn't mean students won't get in, can't get in, but you should know that it's not that you're not qualified, most likely. It's just because of these rules. So just keep that in mind. So if you have UNC Chapel Hill, if you have UCLA, Berkeley, whatever, University of Virginia, Georgia Tech, there's a big difference in the acceptance rate for out-of-state students than it is for in-state students. Okay, so how do you go about creating a college list? Well, the internet is a beautiful thing, and there are a lot of different sites available. You can read them there. I use College Board a lot. It's not my only source, but it is one that I use a lot. But I always tell students I'm an old lady, and that's probably probably why I use it. There's a great free app called Loper. I've highlighted it there at the bottom. They do a really nice job. They ask you a lot of questions, and they can create one. And then, I'm a fan of using ChatGPT, whatever version, as a tool. It can't substitute, but I've had students ask ChatGPT, to create a college list based on different parameters. Again, I wouldn't make it my one and all, the only thing I'd use, but it's not a bad resource. It's not a bad tool to use. One of the things I always like to point out that I do not use college rankings. I know sometimes parents get upset at that, but I have never used them in creating a college list. And it's because of the methodology that is used. If you want to look up why college rankings shouldn't be used in creating a college list. And then also, the biggest reason has to do with the fact that we are all individuals and we all respond and like different things. And a college ranking cannot take into account what I like, what you like, how I respond to things, what type of environment I'm going to thrive in, or things like that. So just know I do not use rankings at all. So if you use, College Board or the Loper app or Chegg or any of the different websites, what they do is they ask for filters, okay? And I'll just go through some of these. So we'll talk a little bit about acceptance rate in a bit. Public and private, I would put them both down at this point. If you're just creating a list, just keep an open mind. Size, there's 3 basic sizes in colleges. Small is 2,000 students or less. Medium is very broad, 2,000 to 15,000. And then anything over 15,000 is considered large. But even that, you can have a school like a Cal Poly that might be like, I don't know, 16, 17,000. And then you could have, was it, is it Purdue? Something I was listening to recently, they were like, they have 44,000 undergrad. Okay, that's a big difference. But those are the different sizes. And again, I would keep an open mind because you might be very surprised that a 6,000 person campus, how large it feels. Because again, they're not all crammed like they are in high school into just a very small area. Geographic location. I would recommend that you be a little bit specific, maybe say specific states or regions of the United States. If you say anywhere, you're going to get a very large list. Again, settings, urban, suburban, rural, college towns. Commuter residential is important. A commuter college just basically means that the majority of students do not live on campus. And there's nothing wrong with a commuter school. But I would say that most students that I'm working with, they're looking for more of the college experience and, they want to live on campus and that sort of thing. So if you're living on campus, you can still live on campus at a commuter college. It's just things are going to feel a little differently after 5 o'clock or on the weekends if most of the students go home. So just pay attention to that. The majors, if you think you want to be an engineer or a nurse and they don't offer any of those, that could be a difficult situation, or it might require you to transfer. Activities, sports, Greek life. Again, Greek life is fraternities and sororities. And, sports are interesting. I have two children. My oldest, my daughter, her thought about sports in college was if I never attend a sporting event, I will be very happy because it's not her thing. My son, on the other hand, he wanted to paint his face different colors and be the fan in the stand. So again, that can be something. Support programs. If you're somebody who maybe you have a 504 or an IEP and you need services, or you have a physical disability and you need support services, some schools offer them, some schools don't. So you need to check into that. You can't really search by liberal or conservative, but we live in a very interesting time right now. So there are certain places that might have different vibes. Weather, sometimes students will tell me that they hate weather, but they want to go to school in the Northeast or in Michigan, whatever. And it's like, well, there's winter there for 4 or 5 months. So if that's a matter to you, and then travel. Again, this is not something you can search by, but pay attention to how easy or difficult it might be to get to and from the campus, to the airport, to home, that sort of thing. And another question I always encourage students to ask themselves and to ask yourself honestly, how much rejection can you handle? And what I mean by that is, let's pretend you're going to apply to 10 colleges. How many no's can you handle before your stomach starts to hurt and you think, man, I don't feel very good about myself? And again, everybody's different. I have students who tell me one school. I have students who tell me they could apply to 9. I don't recommend that because most likely, if you're applying to 10 schools and you've been rejected by 90% of them, the one school you're rejected to or accepted to is not going to be the one that makes your heart flutter with joy. Uh, my number personally would be 3. If I had more than 3 no's out of 10, I'd start to feel bad. So ask yourself that question because that can help you determine your list. And I always strongly recommend students, you know, you might have heard the term liberal arts college. What does that mean? So the full term is liberal arts and sciences universities. And oftentimes, especially in the West, many of these have a religious affiliation. And I have students who just close their mind. They go, nope, nope, not happening. And I just always say, keep an open mind. Both of my children at the start of their college process said, I'm not going to a liberal arts college with a religious affiliation. And we said, fine. We just said, keep an open mind. And we visited. And both of them ended up at different schools, had the best undergrad experience, and it was wonderful. And so just keep an open mind. You can be an English major at the University of Washington, and you can be a computer science major at Gonzaga University or Seattle U or University of Portland, whatever. So it don't think that a liberal arts college means that you only are going to study the humanities. That's not true. You can, and the humanities are great. Um, and so some of the advantages is they believe in a well-rounded education. The community is a little smaller, usually between 4 and 6,000. The focus is on undergraduate, which means if you are a student who wants to go to graduate school, maybe you want to be a doctor, and part of what a student needs for their medical school application is to have done research. It can be much more challenging to do research at a big public research university, let's say UW, because they have graduate students who have the priority over doing research. Whereas at an undergraduate liberal arts college, because there's not a graduate school, if there is, it's usually like a law school or something like that. Anyways, we'll keep that in mind. You can have better relationships. You can get to know your professors much better. There's a lot of leadership opportunities. If social justice, helping underserved populations, equality, things like that is important to you, these type of campuses are great for that. You often might hear about soft skills. These are things like critical thinking and strong communication skills. This is emphasized at a liberal arts college. The networking can be great. Anyways, there's just a lot of benefit. I'm not trying to tell you that you have to go, but if one shows up as you're doing your college search, say, I'll keep an open mind and we'll see. So oftentimes, and I said this earlier, so many people focus on acceptance rate. That is the only thing that they care about. And I'm going to caution you about doing that. So here I'm going into some of my data stuff that I like. So in the United States, there are more than 2,100 four-year public and private universities. If I look at the percentage of universities that accept 10% or less of applicants, it's 35 schools. If I look at schools that accept between 10 and 25%, it's 66 schools. So that is a total of 101 universities, colleges, I use those terms interchangeably. And it's ignoring more than 2,000 of them. Now, I'm not saying that all 2,000 of them are schools that I would put on students' lists. Like I said, what do I determine? I've already told you, and I'll look at it again. But there's a lot of gems out there that I would encourage students to consider in the event that you are not accepted at the highly selective / rejective university. When I use the term highly selective college, all that means is that too many qualified applicants are applying for too few spots. And I got to tell you guys, here in the Seattle area, Lake Washington School District area, there's a lot of very smart, very high achieving students, and colleges can't take everybody. So this has been updated with last year's numbers. And I don't do this to be Debbie Downer. I just think it's really hard when a student hears the term, oh, they have a 5% acceptance rate, a 4%, 7% acceptance rate. What does that mean? So let's use Duke as an example. So last year, 41,000 applicants applied to Duke, and 38,000 of them were rejected. MIT, 29,000 applied, 25,000 were rejected. And you can read the numbers there. And admissions officers say over and over again, yeah, 85% of the students who apply, maybe more, are super qualified. We just don't have enough spots for them. And so I just say that. So if your college list is looking like it's all these highly selective schools, you might want to broaden it out, because in my role here at the foundation, every spring I hear from families who say, oh my gosh, my student applied to 12 schools and they didn't get into any. Okay. So, and then this is something I had done last year. I didn't feel like updating it again, but because I just wanted to show you. So these are a bunch of highly selective schools. You recognize the names. The first two columns are the number is the acceptance rate and the number of applications, then 2014 and then in 1994. Because a lot of times I'll hear parents say, well, I was accepted, so I figure my kid's going to be accepted. Maybe. Or I was not accepted 31 years ago when I applied to Dartmouth, which had a 23% acceptance rate at the time and only 11,000 applications. But I expect my child to get in when there's a 6% acceptance rate and more than 30,000 applications. So just keep things in perspective. Schools have become a lot more selective and a lot more applications have happened. Okay, so you've done a search. You have a list of schools and that you're now like, okay, I have, I don't know what the number is, but you have a list of schools that I could possibly apply to. So I suggest creating a spreadsheet. And you can put in things like the name of the college, where it's located, color coded, is it an in-state, out-of-state, private school, the size, the cost, application requirements, which we'll talk more about tomorrow. And I always say keep an open mind. And a great resource that I use quite frequently is the FIS Guide. It is a $20 resource that is available on Amazon. It looks like a phone book. If I don't, you guys probably don't even know what that reference means, but it's a big, thick book. And it's the top 300 schools in the United States. And as I said earlier, there's more than 2,100 four-year public and private. So there's a lot that aren't in there. And there actually are some very good schools that are not in there. But the schools that are in there, there's a wide variety, and they each have a report. And the reason why I like the FIS guide is the report is written based on student surveys that they send out. It's not a marketing piece. It's not written by college administrators. They survey students. And the information that is there is things like what's the academic atmosphere like? What are the strong majors? How are the professors? Are they approachable? Are they standoffish? Are you anonymous on this campus, or is it, easy to get to know people? What's the social scene like? What's the diversity? What sports scene, if you care about that, surrounding area, what do kids do on the weekends? Does everybody go home and you're stranded? All that type of stuff. And I tell students, if you read that and your first reaction is, wow, this sounds great. This sounds like a place that maybe I would feel like it's my place, keep it on your list. But if you read it and you're like, this does not sound like me, take it off your list. I just and if you can't purchase it, I would imagine the King County Libraries have it. Your high school, college and career center should have it. So you've got these lists, and then what I do is I go through and I color code the college based on, again, it's a little bit of a um, you gotta think about it a little bit. But first, I take into account a student's GPA, their grade point average, whether or not they've taken a lot of rigor classes or not. Test scores, again, if a school uses it, again, some do, some don't. And then factoring in the school's acceptance rate. Now, if it is an out-of-state public, you have to factor in the percentage of out-of-state students that a school accepts, and I'll show you how you can find that out. So the first category of schools are what I call match schools, and I color code them green. You don't have to do it green, you can do whatever you want. But this just means based on the student data and the college data, I think it is likely that a student will be admitted. Now, if I have done my job right and I've looked at things like graduation rates, retention rates, programs, cost, culture, this green school is not a safety school. I personally never, ever, ever, ever want to put a safety school on a student's list. It's one of those words that if you wanted to poke at me and get me agitated, tell me that a school like Oregon State is a safety school, or Gonzaga is a safety school. San Diego State is a safety school. No, they're not. They're great schools. It just means that you're likely to be admitted, keeping in mind that there's no guarantee. Okay, none of this stuff is guaranteed. I define a safety school as a school that defines or that accepts everybody and no one ever graduates. Okay, and I will not give you any examples, but just know that's how I define it. And 80% of colleges in the United States accept at least half the students who apply. All right, so there's a lot of wonderful schools out there. Then I color code. The next ones are my maybes. I use the color blue. Again, use whatever color you want. But this means that about 50% of students are admitted. And which means 50% aren't. And again, you got to factor in, again, is it out of state public and things like that. But and just so you know, when I'm color coding the University of Washington for students that I work with, it's never green. UW is a not always easy to understand with how they do admissions. I'm sure you have heard, I know I have heard of 4.0 students, lots of rigor, who are not admitted to UW. So anyways, UW at a minimum is a blue. Computer science, I always make orange, which is a reach school. That means it accepts between 10 and 25% of the students. And then anything less than 10% is an extreme reach. And again, it has nothing to do with the students. And I work with students who apply to red schools and orange schools and are admitted, and that's wonderful. But I also have worked with a lot of strong students who have applied to orange and red and are not admitted. And again, and they're just as wonderful. So just keep things in perspective. It doesn't mean you won't be admitted, but you have to have, or you should have, in my opinion, a balanced list. And I think sometimes it can be hard for students to understand, but there are more than 26,000 high schools in the United States. There's a lot of high schools. And while we have strong schools, other places do too. And colleges cannot accept every smart school, every smart student from name the high school in our area. Okay, they can't do it. They have to have students from all over. And if you might think, well, but I've got a 4.0 or a 3.7, 3.8 GPA. I just want to bring up the impact of grade inflation in the United States. So back in the 60s, when I was a small child, um, the percentage of students applying to four-year colleges who had um, an A minus to A plus GPA is in the low 20%. Okay. And in Lake Washington, it's either, that would be a 4.0, basically, because we don't have A minuses, whatever. But anyways, and now back as of 2025, what year is that? 2024, it's 84%. Okay. 84% of high school students applying to a four-year college have that GPA. So that's why there's more than just grades that go into this whole process. So when you make a college list, again, you've color coded them. There's a variety of different ways that they can look like. You can have more of a pyramid, you can have a trapezoid, you can have, I've had students who I say, wow, I feel really fortunate, or look at you, you're a strong student, and I think you're gonna get into every single school that you apply to, you're likely to. And then there's some that are it's very balanced. What you don't want to have is this. It is just it is most likely going to be a very unhappy college process for you. You will not feel good. Uh, uh, so that's why I say, like, if you have a lot of reach schools or extreme reach schools, try to find one or two green and blue schools that after you've done your research, you're like, man, I would love to go there. Again, there can be lots of reasons. Wow, I could get a really big scholarship and I could save money for grad school and, things like that. But just keep an open mind and find schools that if you went there, you'd be like, yeah, I would do great. And one of the things that students always have to ask themselves if they are applying to the highly selective, highly rejective schools is, what is it about you that is going to earn you one of those few spots? And I'm just here to tell you, it can't be that you have a 4.0. It can be part of it, but it can't be the only reason. And it can't be that you have a 99th percentile ACT or SAT score. It's got to be more than that, because that is very common. And that's not to diminish what anybody has achieved, but it can't just be that. Okay, so how can you find out information about colleges? So there are two sites that I use very frequently. One is the College Board and one is College Data. So College Board, and this is for the University of Washington. This shows a breakdown of admitted student GPA. So here you can see that 91% of admitted students have a 3.5 or higher that are applying to the University of Washington, Seattle. You can see a breakdown of race and ethnicity. You can search, if you're somebody who says, man, I would love to go to college football games or basketball games, or I want to play club soccer, whatever it is, you can search for all that. College Data has a lot of the same information. You can see a breakdown of test scores. They also will show recommended and required high school courses, lots of different information. Also on college data, I'm a big fan of this scattergram, and I'll be talking more about it when we do the essay session. But every college has to publish, uh, there's about, I don't know, 20 different admission factors, and they have to state whether or not these factors are very important in their admission process, important, considered, or not considered. And this is Carnegie Mellon, so you can see kind of a wide variety of what, but the most important is rigor, GPA, class rank. FYI, Lake Washington School District does not do class rank. You can just say NA. It's not held against you because it's out of your control. Extracurricular, volunteer, character, personal qualities. And then we have the University of Washington, Seattle. And you can see that, they don't consider standardized tests, class rank, recommendations, interviews, level of interest, where you live, alumni, religious affiliations, but they do very much prioritize rigor, GPA, and essays. So I like to give this example, and I would move my Zoom screen, but if I do that, it'll lock up, so I can't do this. But anyways, we got University of Michigan with an 18% acceptance rate, University of Illinois Urbana with a 44% acceptance rate, Stanford with a 4% acceptance rate, UT Austin 29%, and USC with a 10%. And my example is it's a 4.0 students, ton of rigor, 1550 SAT, and they want to be a computer science major. How would you color code these? And just to get to the punchline, all of these would be extreme reach schools. And talking about majors, certain majors, computer science, engineering, business, nursing, they can be very very selective. It can be very hard. And that's why, as I said earlier, I don't focus on the acceptance rate of a college. To me, that is not the important piece. It's because that's an input. I pay attention to the output, which is why, as I said earlier, four-year graduation rates, the retention rate, do the programs fit what a student is looking for? Does the cost work within the family budget? And does the culture fit the student? Purdue University, which is a wonderful university, has become a lot more selective over the last few years. They did a big survey with Gallup, and there were 6 things that they discovered. I think they surveyed more than 30,000 students, and there were 6 things that determined whether or not a student felt that they had had a successful college experience. And here they are. 1, a professor made them excited to learn. My professor cared about me as a person. I had a mentor who encouraged me to pursue my goals and dreams. I was active in extracurricular activities and organizations. I had an internship or job that allowed me to apply what I was learning in the classroom. That's that experiential learning I was talking about. And I worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. And again, it's been a long time since I graduated from college, but I feel like I had a very successful experience, and all of those things were true. And none of that has to do with the acceptance rate. So I know this is kind of small to read here, but I just always encourage people to not get hung up on acceptance rate. So if you look at this chart, you can see we've got NYU there. Excellent 4-year graduation rate, 75% of freshmen graduate in 4 years. Awesome. Retention rate, 96%. Again, fabulous. Acceptance rate, 9%. And then we've got Santa Clara, 82% 4-year graduation rate, 94% retention rate, 44% acceptance rate. Then we look at the University of Michigan, 81% 4-year graduation rate, 98% retention rate, and an 18% acceptance rate. But keep in mind, it's an out-of-state public. So that's why Michigan is an extreme reach for any student who applies to it because of it's challenging. I always like to point out Gonzaga, 77% 4-year graduation rate, 94% retention rate, 76% acceptance rate, and it's a school that will give students a lot of merit aid, and it has an excellent computer science program, excellent engineering, pre-med, all that kind of stuff. So you can look through all those, but just know that I'm not putting down any of the highly selective schools. I think they're awesome. It's just that they're highly selective, which means most students aren't going to be accepted because they don't have enough spots. Another thing to pay attention to is the honors program. And a lot of schools have honors. Sometimes it can be an honors program at a smaller university, or it can be an honors college within a big university. Um, my my daughter went to Loyola Marymount, and she was in their honors program, which was a really good opportunity for her. One of the benefits of being in that program for her was the fact that she could never be told that a class was full. Any class she wanted to get into, because she was in the honors program, she got admitted to, and that is a good thing to have. Honors colleges, the university or Arizona State University has a wonderful honors college called Barrett Honors College. It's 9,000 students within the huge university. There's a lot of benefits. So these honor Washington State University has an excellent honors program. There's a lot of pros. You can have smaller classes. You might get priority registration. You might have nicer dorms, advising scholarships, research funding. Uh, some of the cons can be that you do have to keep a higher GPA. You might have harder classes, more requirements. Uh, Most of the time for an honors program or college, there might be an additional application to it. And some of them can be very selective, like University of Oregon's honors college, and I think Oregon State's they have very low. UW's, University of Washington's honors program is very hard to get into. So as I mentioned, I was going to talk a little bit more about the cost of college. So as I said, a big piece of fit um, is the cost. Does it work? So again, just more data to throw at you. 0.1% of US students receive a full ride. What a full ride means, it's tuition and room and board. 0.1%. 1.5% of US students receive a full tuition scholarship. 7% of high school athletes will play a varsity sport in college. 2% of those students will pay, or 2% of high school students will play for a Division I college, and 2% will receive athletic scholarships. So just know that's not a lot of numbers there, which where does it go back to? As I said, the US system was designed where parents are expected to pay for college. And so this is where parents really need to think about their willingness, not only their ability to pay, but their willingness to pay, because there can be other factors involved. Um, so every college is required to have a net price calculator on its website. And parents, students, you can go onto a school, look for net price calculator, just do a search, fill out your information, and it'll give you a sense of whether or not you might get scholarship money, whether it's need-based or merit-based, and what the cost is going to be. And there are two types of aid in the United States in colleges. There's merit aid and there's need-based aid. And I'll talk more about merit aid. And I do want to just point out um, there's a lot going on in our higher education system in the United States. And I'm going to show some slides, but I'm not very comfortable talking about what's going to happen in the fall because I don't really know what's going to happen. But okay, so there is a category of schools, I mentioned them at the very beginning, called WUI schools. WUI stands for the Western Undergraduate Exchange. There are 14 states that participate. You can see the map there. And I mentioned earlier that out-of-state non-resident tuition is typically 3 times in-state tuition. WUI schools are, if a student qualifies for WUI, it's 1.5 times in-state. So it is a huge, huge cost savings. And it's one of those things where it depends on the college. First of all, it is not all the public universities within that 14 states. So unfortunately, University of Oregon's not on there. CU Boulder's not on there. Uh, San Diego State is not there. UCLA is not there. But there are a lot of good schools that are. Oregon State, Montana State, um, Boise, Colorado State, UC Merced. There's a number of schools. And it depends on the school as far as how selective it is. There are some schools that students might have to have a very high GPA, close to a 4.0, others where it could be any student with a 3.0 or higher is awarded. The one thing about WUI schools, if you are interested in them, you can just go to the website, type in WUI, and it'll bring you to the website. But if if you are interested in applying to a WUI school, just know that WUI scholarships are not unlimited. So the earlier you apply, the better. I wouldn't wait till like the last day and say, "Oh, I hope I get WUI." If you're interested in the WUIs, apply early. Because this shows you the annual cost of college, which means this is the cost every year, and college costs are going up every single year. Um, you can see it, UW is low 30s. Western's a little bit less expensive. Gonzaga, as I said, is a private school, but if a student is strong, they can uh, they can often get very generous money. UCLA, 67,000 right now. Colorado State is a WUI school, so I was showing the WUI pricing. Stanford, and then I showed Lake Washington Technical College, or I could say Bellevue College or Seattle Central College. And that's why for a lot of families, it's not a bad idea for students to perhaps start at community college, earn their associate's degree, and then transfer to a four-year college. So just know that there's lots of different options out there. And there's two different types of money that students can receive. I love the ones that don't have to be paid back, and these are grants, scholarships, merit scholarships, and work study. And loans, of course, do have to be paid back, and they show up in a lot of different ways. This is what I was talking about. I'm just going to pretend that it's going to happen. There's a lot going on with the Department of Education, and that's why I don't know what's going to be happening. But there is a form called FAFSA. You might have heard of it. It's the free application for federal student aid. It comes out typically October 1st, and seniors would be filling it out, and then parents, it's the student's account, and the parents provide information. Um, and just know a lot of schools require it for need-based, well, schools do require it for need-based aid. Sometimes it is required for merit aid, which we'll talk about. It's a free form. It's not hard to fill out. There's a lot of resources, a lot of online services. Again, just I'm hoping to have a financial aid uh, workshop through Find Your Fit this fall so that we can be up to date, because there are a lot of changes going on. And then just know that some schools, especially the more selective ones like University of Michigan, in addition to the FAFSA, they will require the CSS profile, which is put out, it stands for the College Scholarship Service Profile, and it's put out by the College Board. So what is a merit scholarship? It is a tuition discount to attract students. Money is a wonderful way to get students interested in attending a college. Merit scholarships are typically given based on a student's grade point average and sometimes test scores. Prior to COVID, it almost always included test scores. When schools went more test optional, it's lessened, but maybe they want it more now. Students don't apply for merit scholarships. They're given typically with admission. A student might get a letter that says, "Welcome, congratulations, we have admitted you to our school. And in addition to being admitted, we would like to offer you $15,000 for each of the next 4 years, or 20,000 or 5,000, whatever the dollar amount is." You do always want to make sure that they are for 4 years of college, and you don't repay merit scholarships. So just know that. And how can you determine if a college offers merit aid? I mentioned that net price calculator that can show you if your student might be qualified for merit aid. You can look on a college's website. If you go to the search box and type in merit scholarships, see what pops up. If it is an out-of-state public university, like a UC school or UT Austin, University of Virginia, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, whatever. If it's an out-of-state public, make sure you type in the words non-resident merit scholarships, because it'll make a difference. College Board will show, there's a financial page for each college. They'll give you a sense, and you can always ask the admissions officer, can you tell me if there is merit scholarship available? Just as a general rule, the more highly selective universities, so that's less than 25% of students are admitted, typically do not have any merit aid available. I mentioned college majors. We're almost done here. I know we're hitting 1 o'clock. Um, college majors, there's different ways that colleges handle freshman admission. It is a lot more prevalent where freshmen are admitted directly into a major. That is pretty common at a lot of schools. Other schools will have students pick their major by the end of their sophomore year. And if you are an undecided student, ask them how will they support you so that you select a major and you can still graduate in 4 years. Can you change your major? Can you design your own major? That's not an uncommon thing. Multidisciplinary majors where again, you can ask a college, if I'm interested in these two different things, can I combine them somehow? And a lot of times the answer is yes, but you have to do your research because this is your program. What about if you're interested in pre-professional? What if you're interested in becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a physical therapist or a dentist or whatever? Um, just know, for example, there is no major called pre-med, okay? There's a lot of different majors a student can choose. Same with law school or physical therapy or dental, whatever. But find out, how will a student be supported? I would also ask them, how, where do your students get admitted to in these programs? Um, and if you know that, for example, if you want to go to medical school, that you have to do research and you have to do shadowing, and so how far are there hospitals nearby? Like, how does all of this work? Ask them those questions. How do they handle letters of recommendation, which are usually required for graduate programs and things like that? And how do you explore careers if you haven't given it any thought? Asking yourself, what interests you? What are you curious about? Do informational interviews with people, with adults whose career interests you. Your parents can help you find people. And I always tell students, most adults are thrilled if anybody shows any interest in what they're doing. So don't be afraid to ask. Maybe you could see if you can job shadow, which just means you follow them around for a few hours and you watch what they do. Our district has those WANIC programs, which are Washington Network of Interesting Careers or something like that. There's summer WANIC programs, there's full school year WANIC programs, doing internships. But again, the reason why it's important is a lot of schools admit by major. Even if they're not putting freshmen directly in, they're going to be using your choice of major in their admission decision. And then I'm a big believer in visiting colleges, and if possible, of course, I do like the in-person. I won't pretend otherwise, because I think it's harder to get a sense of the feel of a campus if it's not in person. But you can do well with virtual tours, even just in our little area. Maybe you go with your friends. Maybe parents take, one set of parents says, "Oh, we'll take a couple kids this weekend. While other ones do it the next weekend." But it is really important. And we're going to talk about application deadlines. I would personally never recommend that a student apply early decision, which we'll talk about tomorrow, unless they have actually visited a campus in person. It is too big of a decision. So why should you spend the time? And again, it might be a virtual tour. It doesn't have to be in person, but it can demystify what it means to go to college. It can also motivate a student to do better. Some colleges care about demonstrated interest. It can help a student figure out if it's the right fit. I've had students who thought XYZ University was going to be their place because they've done all this stuff. And then we're there in person, they're like, because there's a feeling, there's a culture. And then, as we'll talk about on Thursday, when we talk more about college essays, doing your research about colleges, and instead of just going based on rankings and names and stuff like that, you might have to be writing a supplemental essay that goes along the lines of, tell us why you want to attend our school. And that research can be very beneficial. Again, demonstrated interest, some schools pay attention to it, some don't. Um, but how can you demonstrate interest to a college if they care? Obviously, touring a college virtually or in person. Uh, the fall's coming. A lot of universities come and visit your high schools, attend those sessions, talk to the admissions people, sign up for them. College fairs, there's always a big college fair here in Seattle. Um, you can email the admissions office. If you sign up to receive emails, open them up, and you can also follow them on social media. And then when you finalize a college list, just keep in mind that there's no magic number. I would keep it, I'd keep it closer to 15 or less, maybe 10 or less, but again, I'm not filling out your applications. Um, you can reach out to departments if you're interested in chemistry or you're interested in political science or whatever. Don't hesitate to reach out to the university department. Websites are wonderful. You can get all sorts of contact information. Read the FIS guide if it's available. Look at the data. Talk to students. If there's a club you're interested, follow them on social media. Send them a DM and ask them about things. Again, find out about the budget. It's better to know now than next spring. And just know that there's no perfect college. There is no perfect school. So I am, as I always say, a resource in the community. I'm always very happy to answer any questions that you might have. I'm easily found at uh, Find Your Fit at lwsf.org. If you're interested in more programs, follow us on social media or the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. And I'm going to turn off the recording now.